Have you ever had that feeling where you are driving down the highway and you're pressing the gas pedal all the way to the floor, the engine is absolutely screaming, the RPMs are redlining, and yet you're barely moving?
Oh, yeah. Like you can literally smell the burning rubber.
Exactly. You can feel the heat radiating through the floorboards. You are doing everything right on paper. I mean, you're steering, you're accelerating, you've optimized your schedule, you've read all the productivity hacks, but you are completely exhausted by the grind because somehow you've left the parking brake on.
That image is so perfect because it captures the baseline operating frequency of, well, almost everyone in the modern world right now.
Right, it's just constant friction.
It really is. We are living in this state of chronic high friction output. In biological terms, it's a state of sustained allostatic load. We're burning massive amounts of metabolic energy just to maintain our position, let alone actually move forward.
And the assumption we always make, which is so backwards, is that if we are exhausted, we must just need to push harder. You know, like we need to build a bigger engine or find a better productivity system.
Yeah, we treat the exhaustion as a lack of horsepower, but it's actually a fundamental flaw in how the vehicle is interacting with the road.
So if you are listening to this right now and you recognize that parking brake sensation, that underlying friction, where every single task feels like moving through wet concrete, then this conversation is built specifically for you.
Absolutely.
Today, we are doing a massive double feature masterclass. We are going to deconstruct the entire architecture of how you shift out of that grinding friction and step into a state of effortless flow. We are taking a deep dive into an incredible conceptual arc covering chapters 25, 26, 27, and 28 of our source material.
Which is such a massive shift from where we've been because up until this point, the focus has been heavily internal.
Right. It's been all about tuning the engine,
Right.
regulating the nervous system, optimizing your psychology.
Exactly. But today, we are zooming out. Because you can have the most perfectly tuned, highly optimized internal engine in the world, but if you don't understand the physics of the environment you are driving through, you are still going to burn out.
We have to talk about the network we are plugged into. And the blueprint for this deep dive is going to look like this. Part 1 is going to unpack chapters 25 and 26. We are moving from internal misalignment to recognizing what the source calls the unseen force. And we'll learn its 3 dialects, which are intuition, synchronicity, and timelessness.
And then part 2 transitions into chapters 27 and 28. That's where we master alignment. We'll look at the art of surrender as a two-handed gesture for co-creation and reframe our personal growth as a continuous living update through 5 distinct phases.
I do want to set the tone here right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Because when we start throwing around terms like the unseen force or the resonance of aether from chapter 25, it can sound a bit sci-fi or, mystical woo-woo.
It really can. The terminology can immediately trigger a skeptical defense mechanism for a lot of people. Words like aether often get co-opted by spaces that rely on magical thinking.
Right, but we are grounding this entirely in biology, physics, and pattern recognition.
Completely. I mean, if we trace the concept of the aether back to its origins in early physics, it was simply the proposed medium through which light waves traveled.
Because scientists knew a wave couldn't just travel through nothing.
Exactly. It needed a medium, a bandwidth. And while the literal classical aether was disproven, the underlying reality that space is not empty, but rather a dense interacting field of fundamental forces, quantum fields, and informational bandwidth is, well, it's a cornerstone of modern physics.
So it's not magic, it's just debugging your operating system to finally catch the signal in the noise.
Right. When the text talks about the unseen force, it's pointing toward the fundamental energetic infrastructure of reality.
Let's ground that even further for the listener. Think of it like Wi-Fi. You can't see a Wi-Fi signal, right? You can't touch it. You can't smell it. But it is always there, passing right through your body, carrying massive amounts of complex data at the speed of light.
I love that analogy. Your phone doesn't philosophize about whether the Wi-Fi exists.
No, it just has the correct hardware to find the frequency, sync up to the router, and suddenly information flows effortlessly. You don't see the force directly, but you absolutely know the second your connection is throttling.
Oh, you feel it immediately.
Yeah. When your video buffers, when the page won't load, you feel the friction. The premise here is that human beings are operating within a similar, omnipresent informational bandwidth.
And just like a device struggling to connect to a router, the friction we experience in our daily lives, that parking brake sensation you mentioned, is the direct, measurable symptom of a throttled connection to that broader bandwidth.
The text defines this as the dichotomy between misalignment and alignment.
Right. Misalignment is the friction state. It is swimming upstream against the current of your environment, your biology, your circumstances. Alignment is resonance.
It's that momentum, the ease, that sense of downstream flow. But okay, let me push back a bit, or at least unpack this practically. If my phone has bars, I know I have a signal. I could literally look at the upper right corner of the screen and see the objective data.
Yes.
If we are treating the human body as the receiver for this unseen force, what are our bars? Like, how do you actually know when you are connected to this force?
The measurement apparatus is the human nervous system, and the text offers a highly specific protocol for accessing its data, which it calls the 60-second alignment check.
Okay, walk me through that.
It requires shifting your attention away from your cognitive narrative and toward your somatic markers. So you pause, you stabilize your breathing to downregulate the sympathetic nervous system, and you just scan the physical body.
So you aren't sitting there asking your mind, am I happy with my job?
No, absolutely not. You are observing the biological data. Is the chest cavity constricted? Is the breathing shallow and clavicular? Or is it deep and diaphragmatic? Is there tension in your jaw? These aren't arbitrary feelings. They are highly sophisticated streams of data.
Let's actually break down the computational math behind that, because I think this is where the hardware argument becomes undeniable.
It really does.
We often treat our conscious thoughts, the inner monologue that makes pros and cons lists, as the smartest part of us. But the human body actually operates as an 11 million bit sensory supercomputer.
It's incredible when you look at the numbers.
Yeah, every single second, your sensory organs are pulling in 11 million bits of information. Your visual system alone is processing about 10 million bits. Your skin is pulling in 1 million bits of data regarding temperature, pressure, spatial awareness.
11 million bits of data per second flowing into the central nervous system, and contrast that with the processing power of the conscious mind.
The part of you that thinks in language, the part you identify as you.
Exactly, the conscious waking ego. Neurocognitive research suggests that the conscious mind can process roughly 40 to 50 bits of information per second.
11 million bits versus 40 bits. I mean, that is a staggering bottleneck.
It is. It's the ultimate user illusion, to borrow a term from science writer Tor Neurotranders. When you ask your 40-bit conscious mind to evaluate a complex life situation, say a romantic relationship or a major career move, you are asking a microscopic processor to evaluate an incredibly vast dynamic system.
The 40-bit processor just can't do it.
It can't. It has to filter out almost everything just to function, so it relies on logic, on societal expectations, on whatever narrative it has constructed. It will say, the salary is in the top 10th percentile, the commute is short, therefore we're aligned.
Meanwhile, the 11 million bit supercomputer is running the actual raw data. It's noticing the micro-expressions of contempt on your boss's face that your conscious mind completely missed. It's registering the unnatural fluorescent lighting, the lack of psychological safety, the chronic spike in cortisol every Sunday night.
Yes, the body is screaming. Our digestion is compromised. Our sleep architecture is destroyed. We are under threat. But the 40-bit CEO refuses to read the memo from the research department.
Wow. So the 60-second alignment check is essentially the mechanism that forces the CEO to stop talking, look at the somatic data, and admit that the connection is failing.
Exactly. That somatic data is the first, most fundamental dialect of the unseen force. If the environment is broadcasting a signal, the body is the antenna receiving it.
Which perfectly transitions us into Chapter 26. Once you realize the Wi-Fi exists, how do you read the data packets?
Right. How do you decode the dialects? The text outlines 3 distinct dialects: intuition, synchronicity, and timelessness.
Let's start with intuition. Because, man, we have historically done a terrible job of defining it. Culturally, we've relegated intuition to the realm of the mystical.
We treat it like a magical sixth sense, like a crystal ball that some people just happen to possess.
But if we apply the 11 million bit processing framework we just talked about, intuition becomes a purely mechanical, deeply biological function.
It is advanced subconscious pattern recognition. That's all it is. The brain, particularly structures like the basal ganglia, is exceptionally skilled at implicit learning. It absorbs patterns, probabilities, and environmental cues without any conscious awareness.
So intuition is simply the synthesized output of that massive background processing.
Exactly. When you walk into a room and instantly feel a sense of distrust toward a seemingly friendly stranger, that isn't magic. Your 11 million bit processor just analyzed their vocal cadence, the asymmetry in their facial expressions, their body language.
It compared that data set against decades of archived social interactions, identified a threat pattern, and sent a chemical signal like a literal gut feeling via the vagus nerve to pull you away.
Right. It's the physical feeling of yes or no, arriving before the conscious mind has time to calculate the why.
The body delivers the conclusion, the logic catches up later. And honoring that dialect means learning to trust the body's conclusion even when the 40-bit processor is demanding a spreadsheet of evidence first.
Which is very hard for a lot of us to do.
It really is. Now, if intuition is how the network speaks to us through our internal hardware, synchronicity is how the network communicates through the external environment. This is the second dialect.
And the text defines synchronicity as meaningful coincidence. But we have to set some incredibly strict parameters here.
We really do, because the human brain is a meaning-making machine. It is desperate to find patterns even where none exist. Apophenia, right?
Yes. Synchronicity is not the universe rearranging the laws of physics to manifest a front row parking spot for you just because you visualized it on your vision board.
Let's hit the primary skeptical argument head on here.
Yeah.
Isn't this just the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon? The frequency illusion?
Well, let's unpack that. What's the classic example?
Like when I decide I want to buy a vintage red sports car. Suddenly, I'm driving down the highway and I see vintage red sports cars everywhere. They're in my neighborhood. They're in the movie I'm watching. The skeptic rightly asks, did the universe magically manifest hundreds of red cars overnight just to validate my decision? Or is my brain just suddenly filtering for them?
It's a great question, and the skeptic is entirely correct about the mechanism, but entirely wrong about the implication. It is cognitive bias. Specifically, it is the reticular activating system, or the RAS, going to work.
Okay, tell me more about the RAS.
The RAS is a bundle of nerves at our brainstem that filters out unnecessary information so the important stuff gets through. Your brain cannot consciously process the millions of bits of data bombarding you, so the RAS acts as the gatekeeper.
So when you buy a red car, you assign value to that object. The RAS says, red cars are now relevant to our survival or our goals, and it allows that data through the filter.
Exactly. The red cars were always there. You were just neurologically blind to them.
But wait, here is where it gets really interesting. If it's just my brain filtering reality based on what I deem important, where does the unseen force come in? How does this transcend basic biology and become a dialect of a broader network?
This requires understanding the concept of state-dependent reality. The RAS isn't just filtering for objects like red cars, it is filtering for opportunities, solutions, and relational dynamics. And it does so based heavily on the state of your autonomic nervous system.
So it's tied to our alignment.
Precisely. When you are in a state of deep misalignment, when you are operating from fear, scarcity, and that high-friction parking brake mentality, your amygdala dominates the system. Your RAS is literally programmed to scan the environment exclusively for threats.
It filters out positive opportunities because an opportunity isn't relevant to immediate survival. You become blind to the doors that are open around you.
But when you shift your internal state, when you regulate your nervous system, align your 11 million bit processor with your conscious intent, and step into resonance, you reprogram the RAS. You tune the receiver.
Oh, wow. So the external environment hasn't actually changed. The opportunities, the connections, they were always broadcasting on that frequency.
Right. Synchronicity is the experience of your internal resonance finally matching the external frequency, allowing the data to bypass the filter and enter your conscious awareness. It feels like magic, but it is simply state-dependent perception catching up to objective reality.
You aren't forcing the universe to create something out of nothing. You are finally tuning your radio dial to hear the music that has been playing the whole time.
Exactly. And to categorize this incoming data, the text outlines 4 specific types of synchronicity.
Let's outline those. First is information synchronicity. This is, the moment you are struggling with a complex problem and a seemingly random book falls off a shelf or a conversation overheard at a coffee shop delivers the exact missing variable you needed.
The answer arrives before you fully articulated the question, and the second is connection synchronicity.
The human element.
Right. You are thinking of an old colleague you haven't spoken to in 5 years, you wonder if they might have insight on a project, and 10 minutes later they send you an email out of the blue.
Which points to that subtle, non-local entanglement of human attention. The third is confirmation synchronicity. This is the recurring symbolism. The specific numbers, the animal totems, the repeated phrases.
And while this is the one most easily dismissed as pure apophenia, the psychological utility of it is immense.
I totally agree. When you are doing the difficult work of shifting your life's trajectory, the isolation can be crippling.
It really can. So confirmation synchronicity acts as a psychological anchor. It gives you a psychological thumbs up. It breaks the feeling of existential isolation, providing a subtle nod from the environment that your new state of resonance is being recognized.
But the architecture of synchronicity isn't just about doors opening, and this is vital. It's about the doors that slam shut, which brings us to the fourth and by far the most difficult type of synchronicity to integrate: redirection.
I want to slow down and really unpack this one because this is where the 40-bit conscious ego violently rebels against the process.
It really does. Redirection synchronicity is when the deal you worked on for 6 months inexplicably falls through at the 11th hour. It's the sudden layoff. It's the catastrophic failure of a plan you meticulously optimized.
And when this happens, our default cultural programming kicks in. We assume we have failed, we assume we are being punished, or we assume we just need to apply more force and break the door down.
But the text reframes this powerfully for the listener. It defines redirection synchronicity not as a punishment, but as the universe saying, no, for you, not to you.
No, for you.
It sounds like a comforting platitude you'd find on a greeting card, honestly.
It does sound like a platitude until you view it through the lens of predictive processing. The brain operates as a prediction engine. It constantly generates models of how the future should unfold based on our desires and past experiences.
And when reality doesn't match our prediction, the brain generates an error signal, which we experience emotionally as frustration or despair.
Right. Your 40-bit ego predicted that getting a specific promotion was the ultimate path to security and happiness. When the promotion goes to someone else, the error signal fires.
But the ego's prediction model is wildly limited.
It is so limited, the 40-bit processor cannot see the cascading downstream consequences of that promotion. It cannot see that the new role would require working under a covertly narcissistic executive who would destroy your mental health over the next 3 years.
It cannot see the systemic collapse of that department looming on the horizon.
Exactly. The broader informational network, the unseen force, operates with a vastly wider aperture. Redirection is the systemic intelligence overriding a flawed, localized prediction.
Like the annoying traffic jam that makes you furiously late to your meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It is mathematically probable that it kept you out of the intersection right as a distracted driver ran the red light a mile ahead.
You just can't see the intersection. You are sitting in your car, banging on the steering wheel, completely blind to the fact that you're being protected by the friction.
So to truly trust a redirection, you have to believe the universe sees a map you don't. You have to concede that you do not have the complete map.
You do. You have to trust the intelligence of the broader system over the arrogance of your local processor.
And conceding that map requires us to completely dismantle how we perceive the sequence of events, which seamlessly transitions us into the third and final dialect of the network: timelessness.
The Western cognitive model is entirely reliant on linear time. We view time as an arrow shot from a bow traveling strictly in one direction.
Past, present, future. A straight line.
Right. You are born, you exist in a fleeting present, and you move toward the future. The past is dead, inert data. The future is a blank void. But the text proposes that the unseen force does not operate on a straight line. It operates on a spiral.
The geometry of a spiral fundamentally changes the relationship between past, present, and future. In a straight line, the past gets further away with every passing second. In a spiral, as you loop around, the present moment stacks directly on top of the past and sits directly beneath the future.
Think of it as a massive dynamic weather system rather than a highway. The currents of the past are actively folding into the present, shaping the atmospheric pressure of the future.
So what does this all mean for the listener who is just stressed about their commute tomorrow? Are we saying they can time travel?
What's fascinating here is the biological reality of this. We see this clearly in the science of epigenetics. The trauma your grandparents experienced, a famine, a war, didn't just happen and disappear into the linear past.
The environmental stress of that event chemically altered the DNA methylation in their bodies. That epigenetic signature was passed down through the genetic line.
The past is not dead. The pattern of the past is aggressively shaping the neurobiology of your present moment.
So when I experience an intense, seemingly irrational fear around financial scarcity, even though my bank account is fine today, I am not just reacting to the present. I am processing the active, vibrating frequency of the past directly in my nervous system.
Precisely. And the spiral moves in the other direction as well. Through predictive processing, your nervous system is constantly projecting the trajectory of your current patterns into the future and pulling the emotional weight of those probable outcomes back into the present.
So when you feel a deep intuitive dread about signing a business contract, that isn't fortune telling. It is advanced pattern recognition.
It is your 11 million bit processor calculating the microdata of the present, overlaying it with the epigenetic and learned patterns of the past, projecting the statistical probability of a disastrous future, and synthesizing all of it into a visceral no right now. The past, present, and future are communicating simultaneously.
But accessing that spiral requires stepping out of the linear grind. If you are constantly ruminating on the past or anxious about the future, you are disconnected from the sensory data of the present.
The text points to the state of timelessness, or what it calls the eternal now, as the only place where true alignment occurs.
We experience this viscerally during the flow state. When you are deeply immersed in a high-stakes athletic performance or playing a musical instrument, the prefrontal cortex literally powers down.
Transient hypofrontality, the inner critic goes quiet, the ticking clock vanishes, 3 hours can feel like 10 minutes, or a 10-second sequence can dilate and feel like hours. You have stepped off the straight line of time and into the center of the spiral.
And it is only in that center point that you can actually hear the dialects of intuition and synchronicity clearly, because the 40-bit processor has finally stopped talking.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've read the map, we've tuned the radio, we understand the Wi-Fi. Now, how do we actually drive the car? We are shifting the deep dive into a Part 2, Chapter 27, focusing on the mechanics of alignment and surrender.
This shifts the framework from diagnosis to application. The text introduces the mechanics of alignment as a rigorous, unforgiving three-tumbler lock.
I love the distinction the text makes here, because I joke all the time that alignment has become this dusty corporate buzzword.
Oh, absolutely. We need to align on this initiative.
Yeah, it's used to force agreement in meetings. It's corporate camouflage for compliance. It means stop arguing and do what I'm telling you to do. It's an enforcement of friction.
But true alignment, as defined by the text, is absolute synchronization across 3 distinct overlapping layers of reality: self, reality, and the field. It's a 3-tumbler lock because if even one of those layers is out of phase, the mechanism jams.
Let's examine the tumblers. Tumbler 1 is self. This demands an excruciating level of inner truth and radical honesty. You cannot fake Tumbler 1. If you are staying in a career path solely to fulfill a societal expectation while your gut is screaming to leave, Tumbler 1 is jammed.
You are at war internally. You cannot achieve flow in the external world if your internal world is a battleground. Tumbler 2 is reality. This acts as the grounding wire for the entire system, preventing alignment from devolving into pure delusion.
It's respecting external constraints and facts. The text illustrates this beautifully through the anti-manifestation principle.
Yes, the anti-manifestation principle.
If it's pouring rain outside, Tumbler 2 dictates that you cannot simply close your eyes, vibrate at a higher frequency, and manifest sunshine to keep yourself dry. That is psychosis.
Right. Alignment in that moment is recognizing the objective fact of the rain and putting on a raincoat. You engage intelligently with the terrain that actually exists.
And Tumbler 3 is the field. This is your active relationship with the unseen force, moving with the timing and the current. To illustrate how these 3 tumblers must lock simultaneously, the source material provides this specific anecdote of the traveler in the mountain storm.
It's the perfect stress test for this concept. You have a traveler who has trained for months to climb a specific mountain, but halfway up, a massive, unpredicted storm system rolls in.
Now the ego is screaming, "Winners never quit, push through the pain." We are culturally conditioned to view forcing our way through extreme friction as a badge of honor.
But the traveler stops and runs the 3-tumbler diagnostic. Tumbler 1, self. My core temperature is dropping, my energy is depleted. Tumbler 2, reality. The temperature is freezing, visibility is 0. Tumbler 3, field. The environmental current is pushing back with lethal force. The friction is a redirection.
Every single tumbler is screaming at the traveler to stop. So the traveler turns back. And the revelation here is that turning back wasn't quitting. It wasn't weakness. It was an act of profound resonance.
It was obeying the body, the weather, and the force simultaneously. The traveler realized the mountain wasn't grading their performance. It was simply demanding to be respected.
But turning back required the traveler to execute the most challenging psychological maneuver: surrender.
Yes, surrender.
But wait, surrender implies waving a white flag. It sounds passive, weak, like giving up. If I'm a driven listener, why would I ever want to surrender?
Because the ego had conflated surrender with capitulation. The text reframes surrender as active trust. It introduces the somatic metaphor of the two-handed gesture.
The push and pull of co-creation mapped onto the body. So imagine holding both of your hands out, palms facing upward. Hand one is the hand of offering.
Hand one represents your agency. Intention, grueling preparation, intense effort. It is the absolute rejection of apathy. You bring the best of what you have to the table.
The hand one alone is just brute force. The actual shift into alignment happens with hand two. Hand two is releasing.
Releasing the illusion of control. While hand one offers the effort, hand two releases the rigid attachment to the exact outcome. You say, I have offered my absolute best effort, and now I release the need to micromanage how the universe receives it.
That is the friction point. Because normally we offer our hard work with one hand, and with the other hand we have reality by the throat. And when reality fails to comply, our internal monologue becomes, this should not be happening.
That phrase is the parking brake. The two-handed gesture shifts the operating system from this should not be happening to the much more powerful question, since this is happening, how can I best move with it?
You bypass the complaint department entirely. The text anchors this dynamic in the farmer analogy. A farmer understands this intuitively. Hand one, the farmer plows the soil, plants the seeds, pulls the weeds. They apply massive effort.
But they also possess the wisdom of hand two. They know they cannot stand in the middle of the field and scream at the corn stalks to grow faster. They cannot control the rain. They must surrender to the complex biology of the plant.
The harvest is a co-creation. It is a duet between human agency and the fundamental bandwidth of reality.
You participate as a partner.
A partner. That fundamentally changes the pressure we put on ourselves. However, if we are co-creating, what happens when we inevitably mess up and fall out of alignment? Because we are biological organisms, we are going to fail and fall back into old patterns.
This brings us to the final section of our masterclass, Chapter 28. Reframing personal growth not as a final destination, but as a continuous living update.
I love this because it dismantles the toxic myth that personal growth is an endpoint where you are permanently fixed and never make a mistake again.
Right. Your consciousness is not a monument you build once. It is a software system. And like any complex operating system, it requires continuous patching. It is a living update through 5 distinct phases.
Let's walk the listener through the spiral of this update. Phase 1 is awareness.
This is the moment you notice the bug, like catching yourself in a deep-seated pattern of people-pleasing at work. You suddenly notice the physiological data. Your boss asks you to work the weekend, and you feel the tightness in your chest. You realize your automatic yes is actually a trauma response.
The bug is identified. But awareness alone doesn't fix the code. That leads to phase 2, friction, the messy middle.
The old pattern is fighting back. The next time the boss asks, you try to set a boundary. You say no. And immediately your limbic system panics. It floods you with guilt. The old code is fighting the new code for dominance.
But if you survive that friction, you enter phase 3, experimentation. You try the new code. You hold the new boundary. You actively practice saying no to minor requests, myelinating that new neural pathway.
Which leads to phase 4, integration. The new pathway becomes the superhighway. The new code runs smoothly in the background. You can decline a project calmly. The update has been successfully installed.
And then the trapdoor opens. Phase 5, return.
Phase 5 is when, maybe 2 years later, you are hit with a massive external stressor. Under that pressure, the system collapses. You say yes to an unreasonable request. You revert to the old survival pattern.
So when I fall back into an old bad habit, I haven't failed. I'm just playing the same video game level on a harder difficulty setting.
Exactly. You are not back where you started. You have encountered the exact same issue, but at a higher loop on the spiral. The text introduces the concept of drift here. Systems drift. That is their nature.
A guitar falls out of tune. A car drifts out of alignment.
Recalibration isn't a failure. It's the required maintenance of a conscious life.
Which brings us to the staggering scale of this entire conceptual arc, the fractal self. The pattern you run at the micro level becomes the pattern at the macro level.
A fractal repeats identically at every scale. Applied to human consciousness, the pattern inside your own nervous system becomes the pattern you project into your relationships, your workplace, the broader network.
The text illustrates this with the meeting room example. Imagine a high-stakes corporate meeting where the leader is running a deep survival pattern: fear, scarcity, shifting blame.
Because of our biological imperative to synchronize, The nervous systems of everyone else in that room begin to entrain to that threat state. The room is locked in misalignment.
Now, introduce the fractal self. One person runs a 60-second alignment check under the table. They execute the two-handed gesture. They hold their center.
And the physics of co-regulation take over. By maintaining energetic coherence, they introduce a resonant frequency into the field. Slowly, the macro pattern of the room shifts because one micronode decided to run an alignment update.
When you run a survival pattern, you ripple anxiety into the network. When you run an alignment pattern, you ripple coherence into the network.
If we look at this whole journey, it's about moving from being an unconscious user of life to a rigid architect demanding control, to finally becoming a conscious participant in a co-creative dance.
We moved from polishing our internal hardware to discovering the Wi-Fi of the unseen force, to learning its dialects, to achieving the three-tumbler lock and the two-handed gesture, all the way to updating our source code.
It is a profound evolution.
I want to directly address you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as we end this deep dive. You aren't just isolated code trying to debug yourself in a vacuum. You are the living update. What if the universe isn't throwing obstacles at you to see if you succeed or fail, but is simply waiting in the space between you and the world, listening closely to see what frequency you choose to broadcast next?